Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. With a strong push from the Obama administration, the United Nations Security Council voted Wednesday to impose a fourth round of sanctions on Iran over its alleged nuclear program. The resolution calls for measures against Iranian banks abroad, expands a UN arms embargo, and calls for setting up a cargo inspection regime similar to one in place for North Korea. President Obama praised the Security Council vote.
This resolution will put in place the toughest sanctions ever faced by the Iranian government, and it sends an unmistakable message about the international community's commitment to stopping the spread of nuclear weapons. For years, the Iranian government has failed to live up to its obligations under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. It has violated its commitments to the International Atomic Energy Agency. It has ignored UN Security Council resolutions. And while Iran's leaders hide behind outlandish rhetoric, their actions have been deeply troubling.
Turkey and Brazil voted against the resolution, arguing they saw no reason for imposing more sanctions against Iran. Iran recently reached a deal with Turkey and Brazil to ship most of its enriched uranium to Turkey in exchange for low-level nuclear fuel to run a medical reactor. Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva criticized the Security Council's vote.
Sadly, this time it was Iran who wanted to negotiate. And those who didn't want to negotiate were those who think that force resolves everything. I think that taking this decision was a mistake. I think the Security Council threw out a historic opportunity to negotiate calmly on Iran's nuclear program, and also to discuss in a deeper way the deactivation in countries with nuclear bombs.
Iran responded to the UN vote by threatening to reduce its ties to the International Atomic Energy Agency and to continue its uranium enrichment program. Ali Asghar Sultania is Iran's ambassador to the IAEA.
No matter how many resolutions are passed, the Islamic Republic of Iran will not stop its enrichment activities, which is in full accordance with its right under the statute of IAEA and the NPT.
The Louisiana Department of Health is reporting at least 71 people have suffered health problems believed to be caused by the BP oil spill and the widespread use of chemical dispersants. The sick include 29 oil spill cleanup workers and 21 workers on oil rigs in the Gulf. Symptoms reported by workers have included throat irritation, coughs, chest pain, headaches, and shortness of breath. Another 15 illnesses have been reported in Alabama. On Capitol Hill, Democratic Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney of New York compared the plight of the Gulf cleanup workers to the men and women who worked at Ground Zero after the September 11th attacks.
The health of far too many of those who worked on that toxic pile, they suffered long-term health consequences. Now in the Gulf, men and women are once again being exposed to a toxic sea of elements. After just 40-some days, there are already reports that workers have suffered from exposure to the oil, and this cleanup will go on for years. The time to address the issue of the health of the cleanup workers is now, before they lose it.
In Washington, the Texas shrimper and activist Diane Wilson was arrested Wednesday for pouring fake oil on herself during a Senate energy hearing. Wilson took the dramatic action while Alaska Senator Lisa Murkowski was questioning Interior Secretary Ken Salazar.
We're tired of the bailouts, and we are tired of being dumped on in the Gulf. I'm a commercial fisherman from the Gulf of Mexico, and we're tired of being dumped on.
Let me ask the protesters to please exit the room and allow us to proceed with our hearing.
In other spill news, the McClatchy newspapers are reporting U.S. government regulators warned a decade ago about the dangers of a major deepwater oil spill in the Gulf. The warning said such a spill could start with a fire on a drilling rig, prove hard to stop, and cause extensive damage to fish eggs and wetlands because there were few good ways to capture oil underwater. The disaster scenario was contained in a May 2000 offshore drilling plan for the Shell Oil Company. The 2000 warning indicates some federal regulators investigators were well aware of the potential hazards of deepwater oil production in its early years. Part of the 2000 report warned that not all the spilled oil would rise to the surface and that the spill would likely cause toxic subsea oil plumes similar to the ones scientists have identified in the BP spill. Earlier this week, the federal government acknowledged the BP oil spill has created large underwater oil plumes. Scientists at the University of South Florida say oil plumes now stretch 42 miles northeast of the Deepwater horizon, and 142 miles southwest. Despite the scientific studies, BP is still claiming the plumes don't exist. On Wednesday, BP Chief Operating Officer Doug Suttles appeared on Good Morning America.
There is yet to be anyone who's found any significant quantities below the surface, whether that's just below the surface or at deep levels. We're going to continue to monitor.
We're hearing scientists say there are huge plumes below the surface. Are you denying that still?
Well, what I can tell you is no one's yet found any concentrations that measure below the parts per, or higher than parts per million. So I think it may be dependent on how you're defining this. But what I can tell you, and I've looked at this data, is that we have not found any significant concentration of oil below the surface.
BP Chief Operating Officer Doug Suttles on ABC. President Barack Obama met with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas Wednesday. The meeting came 9 days after Israeli commandos killed 9 activists aboard a humanitarian boat bound for Gaza. Obama urged the Israeli government to loosen its blockade of Gaza.
We agree that Israelis have the right to prevent arms from entering into Gaza that can be used to launch attacks into Israeli territory. But we also think that it is important for us to explore new mechanisms so that we can have goods and services and economic development and the ability of people to start their own businesses and to grow the economy and provide opportunity within Gaza.
President Obama also announced $400 million in assistance for the Palestinians, but the New York Times reports the pledge includes just $70 million in new money. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas called on Israel to lift the blockade of Gaza.
And we also see the need to lift the Israeli siege of the Palestinian people, the need to open all the crossings, and the need to let building material and humanitarian material and all the necessities go into the Palestinian people. And also we appreciate the attention given to the formation of an investigation committee that would investigate what happened in the latest events, the events of what we call the Freedom Flotilla or the Freedom Fleet.
The McClatchy newspapers has obtained an Israeli government document that describes the blockade of Gaza not as a security measure but as a form of economic warfare. Sari Bashi, the director of the Israeli group Gisha, said the documents prove that Israel isn't imposing its blockade for its stated reasons but rather as collective punishment for the Palestinian population of Gaza. In Afghanistan, at least 40 people have died after a suicide bomber attacked a wedding party in Kandahar province. Dozens of people were wounded in the blast. Meanwhile, Afghanistan's former head of intelligence services says President Hamid Karzai has lost faith in the U.S. strategy in Afghanistan as an increasingly looking to Pakistan to end the Taliban insurgency.